Garry Kasparov is an all-time great when it comes to chess. He's dominated the scene for over 2 decades. However, what happens when this legend goes up against a rising, mysterious player? Rey Enigma is a star in the chess streaming world. He's already achieved a draw against players such as Anatoly Karpov, all while remaining a mystery. Let's break down how their encounter goes. Rey, starting with white, opens with pawn d4. Kasparov responds with knight to f6, contemplating the king's Indian defense he is well known for. However, the game takes a different turn after knight to f3 and pawn d5. It can be viewed as a symmetrical version of the queen's pawn opening. Rey has an interesting choice after bishop f5. He can trade the light-squared bishops, harming black's pawn structure. However, he ends up deciding to castle. After a pawn c6, Rey defends his e4 square by playing knight to d2. Kasparov responds by placing his knight on d7, safeguarding against any penetration via the e5 square. Rey then plays queen to e2, to which Garry goes knight e4, where it can then control white's position. Rey responds with pawn b3, which comes to Garry's surprise. After a few moves, such as bishop d6 and b2, Rey makes a critical capture with bishop e4. However, this turns out to be a big error. After pawn e4 takes out the bishop, Rey decides to put his knight on e5, forcing further trades, losing a pawn in the process. Rey plays knight to c4, scaring away Garry's queen and potentially going to d6. In response, Kasparov strikes back with pawn b5, which forces Rey to play knight d6. Kasparov retaliates with rook to d8, which forces Rey to trade his knight for Kasparov's bishop. Rey then plays queen h5, trying to put stress on Kasparov's king. Garry responds with queen to e5, revealing a strategy by Rey. His plan becomes apparent as he plays queen g5, setting up possibilities with the pawn on h4. A pair of rooks are subsequently traded, and Garry's backward d5 pawn becomes a possible issue. Rey goes with rook d1, to which Kasparov kicks out his queen with pawn h6, and puts pressure on Garry's queenside pawns with rook c8. Rey is forced to defend his c2 pawn by moving his queen back to e2. Kasparov defends his b5 pawn by playing pawn a6, and Rey moves his rook to d4. Kasparov makes a great move with pawn f4, breaking down Rey's pawn chain. Following the pawns being traded, Kasparov seizes the opportunity and attacks with queen g3, targeting the defenseless h4 pawn. This actually proves to be a critical error. After pawn h5, Rey's battery on the d-file becomes dangerous, and Garry will lose a pawn. Undeterred, Kasparov plays rook d8, hoping Rey would take the pawn on d5, making the mistake of leaving the e3 pawn in danger. The only move that would help Garry come back is rook e4. This is due to it allowing him to take Garry's rook and causing a check. Under the stress of time, Rey plays pawn c4 instead and finds himself declining even more. After the trade of pawns, Kasparov plays rook to b4, posing a back rank threat. Rey tries to prevent Garry's advancement by placing queen c1, but that doesn't stop Kasparov from playing rook b1, forcing Rey to capture the rook with his queen. This allows Garry's queen to take e3, which all adds up to be a devastating set of moves for Rey. Rey checks on b8, which then gives him the ability to attack the f7 pawn. However, this allows Garry to create 2 connected passed pawns, which are strong in an endgame. Following a few small moves, Garry pushes his queen to d6, allowing his pawns to move down the board. Rey's only chance now is to create a draw. Rey plays queen f5, hoping to create an infinite check, but time is running out. The checks don't last long, and Garry starts moving his pawns to victory. Rey is also able to take Kasparov's a5 pawn, but he is unable to stop the advancement of the other pawns. After Garry moves his pawn to e2, Rey can only move his queen to e1 to stop it. This allows Garry to advance his other pawn. Rey tries to push his own pawn ahead, but to no avail. Garry ignores that movement and goes with pawn d2 in the hopes of another queen. Rey tries to check in order to make his own queen. Despite both players making queens, Garry's king is still safe and he still has another queen on the way. Struggling to make a move, Rey's clock runs out before he can resign. The 2 exchange handshakes, and Garry remains dominant as not even a mysteriously talented player could beat him. Thank you for watching.